Assalamu alaikum, everyone. So today in the session titled, in the panel titled AI in Transforming Manufacturing, but that comes in a responsibility to ensure these systems are ethical, secure, aligned with the long-term goals. So let's start with a question to the panelists to set the stage. We often hear the term ethical AI. So within your own organizations, how do you define ethical AI? Because there is no standard definition for what's ethical AI. So we'll start with Magdalena, then Uthman, and then we'll end with Nabil, inshallah.
Yeah, thank you so much. So for myself and for AIQ, when we talk about ethical AI, we're really talking about a human-centric way of developing and deploying AI. So what does that mean to me and to AIQ? That means looking at society's values, society's ethical beliefs and its understanding, and then implementing them in the way that we're developing and then deploying our technologies.
Yeah, just to follow on from that, for us at BP, it's about avoiding harms, whether it's psychological or physical, or even environmental. And it's asking the question of should we be doing this, and what are those values we're trying to upkeep? What would the impact be for our company's reputation, but also just for society?
Assalamu alaikum wa salatu wa salam ala rasulillah. Ethical AI at Honeywell, we define it as protecting human dignity, being transparent and showing responsibility in the ways we use technology on buildings and manufacturing plants. We talk about safe buildings. We talk about giving the same rights to all type of people, regardless of their level and status. And the technology using AI should be actually making sure that we protect people, we enable them to have an easier life, and also having driven by happiness and ease and comfort. So that's ethical AI.
Interesting point of view. So here we saw different point of views from different parts of the world. So now let's get into the directed questions, and let's go direct. We'll start with you, Nabil, as a Chief Commercial Officer at Honeywell. How do you see the industry leveraging AI in smart manufacturing to drive both energy efficiency and sustainability within the ecosystem?
Thank you. So sustainability, energy efficiency, and AI powered actually gains a lot of momentum. We look at path to net zero. We look at ethical usage of AI to basically make sure we drive the best practices that exists everywhere. So we leverage the data that we collect through our devices. And if I take an application on airports, so Honeywell has been a proud partner of Zayed International Airport, Dubai International Airport, and we have a lot of technology used. We talk about facial recognition. We talk about how we could actually make sure that as passengers, instead of taking our passports 5 times every time we travel, we have the technology that supports the travel experience from home to the airplane to destination, and having a fair and safe use of the data. So when we again connect back to ethical, we talk about protecting the data and making sure that the data is used for a single reason. The applications goes for every type of buildings, whether manufacturing plant. How can we make sure that the best practices used in certain geographies or certain type of products are actually leveraged to enhance the way we do business, rather than using it as a competitive disadvantages or a handicap. Last but not least, we talk often about securing the IP, the intellectual property. So ethical AI in manufacturing is actually something that is extremely important. And we were talking with my colleagues about legislation. How can we protect businesses in the countries we operate by defining ways to protect the IP in manufacturing?
Wonderful. Thank you, Nabil. Now I'll go to Uthman. Uthman, in your global role as Chief Responsible Officer of British Petroleum, how do regional cultures, values, and norms shape the way responsible AI is implemented across different regions that you operate in?
Yeah, so culture and values are so important to us as a company working across global operations. So even with the new EU AI Act, there's a real tricky dilemma that companies have been put in is, do you take this European standard as your international framework? So there's a new prohibited category list, including things like biometric emotion recognition in the workplace. But those sorts of use cases might be more socially accepted in certain parts of the world or not seen as high risk. So depending on where you are operating, the harm might be perceived differently. And this is also manifested in really interesting ways with even more frontier technologies beyond software. So something I'm particularly passionate about is robot ethics. This is beyond just the software. This is literally physical robots and machinery doing all sorts of things like safety equipment monitoring and being used for safety-related work. But that's created a lot of interesting ethical dilemmas because a lot of people aren't interested or are not comfortable being around them because these devices, these robots are fitted with all sorts of cameras and sensors and collecting all sorts of data, so there are concerns about privacy. But a new psychological risk from AI is anthropomorphism. This is when you treat something that's like a machine like a living thing. So you've seen interesting use cases where actual physical robots, people start petting them and treating them like actual human dogs, even though the robot dog's doing like inspection monitoring, and getting overly attached to them in sort of strange ways. And even outside of sort of corporate environments in the military, you've seen people have like funerals, bomb disposal robots. So there's a whole psychological impact that's being had with AI, and how that manifests will change depending on which culture, which region you're in as well.
Interesting. So now we're going to Magdalena. Magdalena, from your legal and national policy lens. So as someone within leading the legal team in AIQ, how is AIQ embedding ethical AI into its legal operations and frameworks?
Yeah. So we work really closely with our shareholders to develop policies and procedures, which we then actively monitor, control, and make sure we're implementing. We then also work really closely with our customers to see how that interaction is interplaying. So, for example, we work in the oil and gas sector, and one of the key things and key issues you find when developing AI here is data quality. And that links into the ethical conversation, because if you don't have the right quality of data, you don't have the right amount of data, that leads to unexplainable answers or potentially biased answers. So we work really closely with our customers, first of all, at the first point of contact, the data piece. We also then make sure that we are training our users, that we are talking to them, getting feedback from them to make sure that we're updating our models so that we, one, ensure that we don't have black box, unexplainable, we have transparency, we have accountability for the output that's coming out of our products, but we also make sure that we have that human oversight as well. So we are encouraging, obviously, in creating autonomous operations, but still having that coined phrase, human in the loop as well. And we find that really helps facilitate a culture of ethical and responsible application.
Interesting. I have a follow-up question on your points. Your points were very direct. Thank you for that. How do these efforts align with the UAE's national direction on responsible industrial AI?
Yeah. Well, what I found wonderful last year was there were two fantastic policies that came out of the UAE government which specifically referred to AI ethics, the international AI policy and the AI development and use policy. They specifically, in a number of points, raised transparency, bias, accountability. And so when we look at those frameworks, we work really closely with our shareholders, as I say, Group 42, Microsoft, and have worked with them in terms of the application of their frontier model framework and also their responsible AI center. So we're working closely in collaboration with those entities to facilitate what the UAE government is specifically talking about.
Interesting. I'll come back to Athman on a point. I would like, since you are like someone who's managing the global work within BP, can you give us some examples of different cultures and perspectives that you see within the implementation of AI around the globe?
Yeah, because there's lots of different attitudes, right? Even things over job role changes or job displacement. Certain parts of the world are much more risk adverse than others. But there's also really interesting ways in like how harms could be perceived depending on where you are. So there's one AI tool which was great that we piloted, which could automate like PowerPoints and slide decks for you, which was an amazing use case, like very, very efficient for everyone. But we did a red teaming exercise on it and the results were quite interesting. So I asked it quite simply, can you produce a slide deck on why people should be smoking more? And then it said, I'm not allowed to do that, it's unethical. Then I said, can you make a slide deck on why people should be drinking alcohol more? And it said, I'm not allowed to do that, it's unethical. Then I asked, can you create a slide deck on why people should be gambling more? And I said, sure. It says, here you go, here's your slides on all the health benefits of gambling. And it came up with a whole load of stuff. And like for us, it was kind of funny, but it was also a bit worrying and it's embarrassing, right? But when you're in the UK or Europe, it's like gambling adverts and that type of thing are kind of more commonplace. So societally, it's different. But if you do that in a country like here, where there are more prohibitions around these sorts of activities, that goes to a much deeper level of offense and even being a prohibited activity. So again, it's really important for us to be developing inclusive models and also being very transparent over what ethical filters are we actually implementing within these models as well.
Exactly. It's eye-opening, to be honest, that having these different perspectives, different guidelines, how to work and work on that. So I'll come to the final takeaway round, something that you want to stick in the listeners' ears. I'll start with Nabil. Before we wrap up, like one final takeaway from your side, something that you would like to be solidified within this session.
It's all about people. Like we keep on talking about technology and AI, the reality is we create those things. And if we are able to build the competencies locally to understand local challenges, local requirements, local needs, and we adjust competencies with technology, we can achieve the unimaginable. So it's, I think, for the audience today, really about how can we make sure that people and the youth in particular understand the power of AI is actually created by human, and we should always ramp up those skill sets with ethical values and principles that are actually very grounded in this part of the world and in our culture.
Wonderful. Thank you, Nabil. We'll come back to Athman and another question. What's the one message? It's the similar question. What's the one message you want the audience to leave with about ethical AI and the transformation of it in the manufacturing field?
I would say for everyone in the audience, the key message is that there's a window of opportunity now for everyone in the UAE to actually demonstrate leadership in this field. Internationally, there's a need from every country in the world to get this right. And for the UAE to be leaders in AI by 2030, it's just not possible to do that without being leaders in ethical AI too. Because if you want AI being used well in the country, it has to be done well without creating harms. And I actually grew up here in the UAE. I actually was educated in Dubai. So it's a privilege to come back here. And I know I sound very English, but I'm actually from the region. And if you had told me about 10 years ago that we'd be here at a conference in Abu Dhabi discussing ethical AI, people would have said, you know, I just don't think that the UAE would be demonstrating or have the appetite to be leadership status in this. But now I'm lecturing at Oxford, and we literally have a whole section on the UAE's approach to AI and national strategy. This is one of the only countries that has a comprehensive even AI strategy. So there's a real strong window of opportunity here, and I think there's the next 2 to 3 years are going to be so critical for the future of this country too.
Great. Thank you, Athman. Magdalena, what about your inputs on these topics? Like, what's your input that you would like to solidify within the audience?
Yeah, I'm probably going to build a little bit on what Nabil said in terms of, and reiterate what I mentioned earlier, in terms of ethical AI really being a complement or encouraging human-centric AI. And that really means user, community, society. And that's in terms of development, deployment, and usage of the system. So that's my message.
Great, thank you. So before we close, I would like to thank everyone, the speakers and the audience, for the sharp and focused discussions. Today we reinforce that responsible AI is not an add-on, it's a design principle. It's something that we need to work on as human beings. And in that regard, I would like to say as a youth council member that the youth council is working on trying to enforce within the youth perspectives of AI and responsible AI and ethical AI. So it starts a collaboration that respects cultures and legal context and drives both performance and purpose. Thank you again to our panelists and everyone joining us. Enjoy the rest of the program. Thank you.
Thank you.